Hey guys, this is Anthony Morganti from anthonymorganti.com, and this is episode 93 of Photo Critiques. And in Photo Critiques, people send me in some of their best images, and I critique each shot with suggestions on how they can improve it. And today, I'm pleased to critique the work of Rodrigo Pessotti Maia. And Rodrigo sent me in some really nice images. He's only been into photography since this past August was when he got his first camera. So he's doing a really nice job. You'll see. This first one, it's a very interesting shot. We have the young people sitting around. I don't know if this is like a schoolyard or something like that, but it's really nicely done. I like that he didn't put the horizon right in the middle. He has it in the lower part of the picture. It's really nice. We have interesting sky. It was a bright sky, so he put either a graduated filter or a vignette on it. So it helps draw your attention more towards the middle. So it's very well done. We have a photographer right there. I don't know what's going on there, but that's kind of interesting too. So it's a really nice shot. What I like about it most, though, is Rodrigo obviously processed the image, but he didn't over process it. Whenever you're processing a landscape image and there's people in it, it's easy to over process it for the landscape, making that look good, but then the skin tones on the people look horrible. And he did a real nice job of balancing it so that we have a nicely processed landscape area, but the people don't look like aliens. So it's a really nice job, Rodrigo. This shot here, I don't know if this is a cherry blossom tree or not. But to me, we have around here cherry blossom trees look like this, and they're beautiful trees. The problem with the scene, though, is it's too busy. We have this building back here, this wall. Looks like there's another fence back here. We have this here. I'm not really sure what it is. We have this tree kind of coming in over here. So this is one that you want to, show off this beautiful tree, but the scene itself is busy. So you got to really be creative and work the scene. It looks like the sun's coming this way. Maybe you could get in and silhouette or shoot a clump of flowers between the sun and your lens, something like that. Maybe you could lay right on your back with your head right here and shoot straight up the trunk of the tree and get a shot like that. So you really have to think creatively and try to exploit this tree and show it off the best you can while minimizing the things in the scene that are distracting, like this building and kind of the sky's not super interesting, but you know you still want to take this picture of this tree because it's beautiful, so you work the scene. This shot here is very nice exposure. The sky is gorgeous, very well done. We have this palm here coming in. We have one coming in over here. I don't know what kind of lens you used or anything like that, as I mentioned before. But on this one here, I think if you just got closer and concentrated on these four palm trees here, the bench here, I think it would have been a stronger shot. I could kind of simulate it in by cropping. Now I don't want everyone to to crop your shots to get them to look decent. You really got to try to get this in camera. I'm just cropping to kind of show you, give you an idea of what I'm talking about. I think that's a much stronger, more compelling shot than we had previously. See, it won't do a before and after when I do a crop. It never does. I don't know why. But there's kind of the before, if you see what I mean. So I think that's a stronger shot. The other thing is, we got these really dark areas in here, and because the sun's a little harsh, so I would just open up shadows just a little bit, and it kind of makes the palm tree stand out a little more. It just makes them that more dominant in the shot. See what I mean? So that's something to think about. Of course, adjusting shadows, adjusting sliders like that, that's personal preference. That's why all of us develop our shots. We do it differently, and that's what makes our photography unique from everyone else's. But that's just a suggestion. I think it makes the palm trees stand out a little more. This is a really cool shot. In one of the early critiques, I'm talking like one of the first few, I got a shot almost identical to this someone sent in, and I'm wondering if it's the same area, although that one I recall there were buildings throughout here, whereas this looks like it's some type of park. But this is a really nice shot. Notice we have again the starburst effect on these pointed light sources, which is in this case are the street lamps. And if you didn't see any earlier critiques, you get that by using a smaller f-stop. That's all. Just usually around f13. Not all lenses will do it. It depends on how the internal structure of the lens is made. But if your lens does it, it's a really nice effect. Of course, if you use f13, you're going to have to use a tripod because you're using a slower shutter speed. So in a night scene like this, f13 is pretty small. So you probably 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, who knows. And you'd want to use a tripod because you don't want to boost the ISO. You want as noise free as possible in a shot like this. As far as this composition, this part over here is really dark and it's not really adding a lot to the scene. So I'm wondering, I don't know what's over here. I don't know if you could have tilted your camera a little bit more to the right and eliminated this dark area, or at least minimized it more and shot more of the more interesting area where it's brighter and there's the lights and whatnot. So I don't know what's over there. The other alternative, if there's really something slightly over here, is shoot it vertically. Get a vertical shot of this. I think that would have been a really nice shot too. So something to think about. This shot here is a very interesting processing I like a lot. It's got kind of the color drained out of it, but there's still color there. As you can see, there's just enough color. This tree is very photo worthy. It's a very interesting tree. It's leaning from the wind probably over, all the years it's had wind from the ocean blowing on it. So it's very interesting in that regard. The thing is, the vehicles over here, this tree here, this light post here, they're distracting, from the shot. It's kind of a tight, cluttered scene, so it's hard to shoot. I don't know what kind of lens you used. I don't know if you could have got closer and used a really wide angle lens and still got this tree in but eliminated most of this over here. So again, I'm going to say it again, work the scene. This tree is interesting to shoot. Do something different to try to get this tree, to exploit this tree, but get rid of all the distractions. This is a really nice shot. I like this shot a lot. And it's a really hard exposure. I mentioned this in some critiques. We have very bright areas and very dark areas. And that's hard to do. Our eyes see a lot more range of light, a lot more dynamic range of light than a camera does. So you have to do a balancing act when you take a shot. You either have to have your brights blown out or your dark areas, your shadows in total darkness. Generally, when you do a scene like this, and I'm going to show you real quick, is in the histogram you can see if I hover over the right one, it will show me any highlights that are blown out, and as you can see, there's no highlights blown out. If there were, there'd be red blotches showing when I hover over this triangle. Now conversely, I'm going to hover over the shadows triangle and you can see all that blue down here. That means that there's no detail in that area anymore. It's so dark, it's just absolute black, there's no detail. Generally speaking, when you're developing your shots, you don't want anything blown out white. It's okay to have some stuff black, absolute darkness. Just basic composition, or basic processing I should say, is viewers don't like to see photographs that have blown out white. It's just distracting because our eyes tend to be drawn to those brighter areas. So try to avoid that. If you got to do the balancing act on a very high dynamic range scene like this, tilt it towards darkness. So you have these, areas here, in the absolute black area. That's fine. Now you could turn up the shadows a little bit. You could go to that slider again, the shadow slider, and bring this up. And you could see you could rescue a lot of the detail in the shadows if you so choose. Now this is your vision, it's your photograph. You do what you think is right. But then as you can see, now when I hover over it, we still got a lot of it, in absolute darkness. But now we have more detail to look at. So that's something to consider. Also, one real quick note I'm going to add here. I get a lot of emails, people working with Lightroom, and they'll say that they have all this blue on their picture and it won't go away. or they'll say they have all this red on this picture and it won't go away. That's because you probably inadvertently clicked on one of these triangles, and they're just the clipping points. So just click on it again and it will turn off. So if you ever have that and the blue won't go away or the red won't go away, there's nothing blown out in this shot, but if it was, it would be red. So just click on the triangles and you'll get it to turn off. So that's just a real quick note, so I don't get as many emails from people using Lightroom wondering why they have all this blue or all this red. The other thing I want to add, a lot of people ask me, now Rodrigo did a fantastic job on this, so this really doesn't apply to him or this shot. They don't know where to focus when they're taking a landscape shot. And there's probably 3 different ways, main ways that people focus on a landscape. The first way is what they call the hyperfocal distance. They focus at this point called the hyperfocal distance, and it's a scientific way using the science of optics of how they come up with this distance. And it's become very popular nowadays because of the advent of smartphones, because there's apps for it where you could look up this distance. In the old days, before there were smartphones, photographers used to carry charts. And really, you just had to know 2 elements of the situation. You had to know what f-stop you were going to use, and you had to know the focal length of your lens. So nowadays, with an app, if you're using a 50mm lens, you dial in 50 millimeters. If you're using an f-stop of f11, you dial in f11, and the app will tell you exactly how far away you focus to get the maximum depth of field. So a lot of people do it and they swear by it, and it works. It does work. I've done it before. I don't like it. And the reason why I don't like it is a lot. First of all, I just don't like pulling out my phone and putting in, 16 millimeters, f11. It's just, I don't know. It's just, I don't like it. I'd rather not mess with my phone when I'm out photographing things. That's number one. That's me, though. The other thing is, it usually tells you something like 2 feet 6 inches, or if I'm in Canada, it will tell me because I'll switch it. No, I'm just making a joke. But if I was in Canada, it might tell me 0.6 of a meter. Well, how do I focus on that? There's nothing there to focus on, so I have to get either someone to stand there or put an object there. I have to measure it, maybe with a tape measure, because nowadays none of my lenses really have those numbers on them where I could just dial in 2.6 feet or 2 feet 6 inches. So it's like really just a pain in the butt to focus exactly where they're telling you to focus. If you get a tape measure from the your lens out and you're going to measure to that exact point, have someone stand there, focus there, and then well, maybe it'll work. But to me, it's just a pain in the butt. You could guess, but I mean, what's the point then? So that's one way. The other way is you focus a third up into the scene, and this is the way I often do it. So in this particular image, you would focus around here. That's about 1/3 of the way up into the scene. The thinking is that when you focus on something, you have twice as much depth of field beyond the focal point than you do in front of the focal point. So the idea is if you focus a third of the way up into the scene, most of the scene should be in focus. And I found it works. Now, scientifically, it probably doesn't work to the inch, like you think it does, but it works good enough and it works well. So that's what I do most of the time. But if there is a strong subject in my image, in the midground or the foreground, I forget about everything else and I focus on that subject. So in this scene here, let's say there was a mermaid right here. Okay? I'm going to focus on that mermaid. I don't care if the hyperfocal distance might be right there. 1/3 of the way of the scene might be there. But if the mermaid is right there, I'm focusing on the mermaid, because the mermaid is the most important thing in that scene, and I want the most important thing in the scene to be in perfect, sharp, pin sharp focus. So that's what I do. If there's a strong subject in the midground to the foreground, That's where I focus all the time. Now, if the mermaid is there and I'm focusing on it, I still want everything else in focus. So I'm not going to use an f-stop at 2.8. I'm going to use f11, f16, something really small. So I get all this other stuff in focus too. So, keep that in mind. I have an article on my website about it. I think it's called Notes on Focusing and Hyperfocal Distance, something like that. I mean, if you go in the search box on my website and you just type in hyperfocal, you'll find the article. And I explain why I do it, and I show some pictures that illustrate how I do it, why I do it. So check that out. So that's some tips for people that always wonder where to focus on a landscape. And I get a lot of emails. Like every week I get at least 3 emails where people ask me to talk about where to focus on a landscape. And I do recall back when I first started photography, I was a little confused too. I used to at first just focus to infinity and thought, well, infinity, everything's in focus. Well, that's not true. So don't focus to infinity. Use one of those 3 methods. I might have been sounding like too negative on hyperfocal distance only because I don't do it, but a lot of people swear by it, and if it works for you, by all means do it. Look into it, how to do it with a hyperfocal distance. Like, you get an app, and all you have to know is the focal length of the lens. If you're using a zoom lens, something like, I don't know, like a 24 to 300 millimeter zoom. If you're at 28 millimeters, that's what you put in the app, 28 millimeters, and your f-stop, f16, f11, whatever you're using, and it will tell you the distance to focus at. So by all means, do one of those 3 methods. That, a third of the way up in the scene, or focus on the subject that is in the midground to the foreground, or do a combination of all 3. That's pretty much, I do a combination of the 2. I've done hyperfocal in the past, as I mentioned. I haven't done it in at least a year, 2 years. I don't see a need to do it. My photos seem to come out pretty decently focused, so I don't worry about it. So I'm sorry about that big long rant at the end, but a lot of people were asking me those questions, and I wanted to straighten that out. And I'd like to thank Rodrigo for sending me in his images. I mean, for only having a camera since this past August, Rodrigo, you're doing a great job. Very well done. And I'd like to thank everyone who watches all my videos. I really, really do appreciate it. And if you have time, go over to my website. Remember, look up Hyperfocal, and you'll find that article. Or, just search around my website. There's all kinds of stuff over there on photography, and take a look at what's over there. And if you haven't already, I'd really appreciate it if you went to YouTube and subscribed to my YouTube channel. That's it for now. I'll talk to you guys soon.